So everybody, welcome to this second talk. I guess it's a Dharma talk. This second talk about this book, Becoming Vajrasattva, which hopefully everybody can see, Becoming Vajrasattva. Okay. And I thought what we would do, since we ended with a breathing exercise last time, and since Lama Yeshe says that taking secret refuge is all about taking refuge in your own inner energies, we could start with the 9-round breathing exercise. And whoops, wait, I've got a message here. Participant has enabled. Oh, okay. I don't need to know about that. So I thought we would start with the 9-round breathing exercise, if that's okay with everybody. And then if it works out, time-wise, I'll end with a short Vajrasattva meditation. Not the one that is in the Becoming Vajrasattva book, which is a bit more extensive, but I'll do a thumbnail, as it were, which I'm familiar with from another sadhana that I do. But it's an okay meditation. It was composed by Pabanka Rinpoche, and he's definitely reliable, so it's okay. Different lamas under different circumstances will compose their own sadhanas, and there's some features of them that are all the same, and some features that are a little bit different. And I will actually talk about that, probably not today, but probably in our third session, which will be in 2 weeks, because next week, Venerable Rabina is doing a workshop here. I think it's called On Active Compassion. So I thought it'd be best not to try and do a class on Saturday night when she's doing that over the weekend. There's one other thing that I would like to do at this point. Okay, here we are back again. I was playing with some of the technical features of Zoom to be sure that you could actually see me and that you weren't seeing me from here down or here up or something strange like that. Okay, where was I? All right, so we'll finish with a short meditation on Vajrasattva. But right now, let's do the 9-round breathing exercise. And for those of you for whom it's new, I'll just give a brief overview and then I'll guide people on it, but you won't see me doing it because I can't breathe and hold my nose and hold my breath and talk to you at the same time. I don't know, I just can't do it. Why not? I know, right, you think with all the deities that I practice that have multiple heads, I'd have enough noses to go around, but I haven't gotten there yet, so there we have it. So the way it works is you will hold one of your nostrils closed and one open. And the way I was taught, you start on the right side and you imagine a red channel of energy that runs down to the base of your spine through your navel, which is very important. And you hold the breath, you count, I don't know, maybe 9 on the in-breath, hold it for 9, and then you release. So put your finger on the other navel, you release up the left-hand channel, which is white. We do that 3 times, then we reverse, then inhale through both, and then exhale, if you can, through the top of your head. There is a blue channel that runs up the top of your head. And the idea is you're purifying the attraction and hatred in the 2 channels on the left, according to Lama Yeshe. And in the central channel, you're purifying delusions and ignorance. And this is related to a lot of other stuff in completion stage yoga, which I may talk about when we get to that, but I won't talk about right now. Okay, so if everybody's good, we get started on this. And so in the right nostril for a count of 9. Hold the breath down below your navel, but toward the back of your spine for a count of 9. And exhale out the other channel, which is the white channel, for a count of 9. Okay, and then once again. Now we reverse and in through the left nostril. Out for a count of 9. In again through the left nostril for a count of 9. Hold for a count of 9. Out through the right nostril for a count of 9. In. Hold. Out. Okay, now in through both nostrils. Hold. And out. In. And in again.
We don't do the hold.
Doesn't matter, probably.
There's different.
And out.
You've got red on the right, but they have white on it.
I noticed that last week after all this.
But it's different practices. Kempo said that different practices, it changes different. It's not rushed. It's not locked. There's not one correct way.
Okay. That should help calm your mind down. It always works for me. Anybody remember in old books, at the very end of the book, there'd be a page called the errata page for all the mistakes that were made in printing? That doesn't seem to exist anymore. Well, this is the errata page. I have to correct something that I said last week. That's really important. I was talking about my 3 Tantric Lamas. And when I was talking about Zachoji Rinpoche, I said, I might outlive him. What I meant to say was he might outlive me. And if he outlives me, then it'll be interesting to see what happens when I come around again, because all 3 of my lamas will have been incarnated at that point, unless I'm unfortunate enough to live to some extreme old age, which I think would not be at all pleasant. So that was the errata page. We can get on with things now. There is a point in Lama Yeshe's book, Becoming Vajrasattva, where he talks about symbolism. And that's the place where I want to begin today. This is actually in this section called the Actual Yoga Method. And it's on page 44. And it goes on to page 45. He talks about the visualization of Vajrasattva. And he talks about, and this is what he says. He says, Vajrasattva, he embraces his consort Dorji Nima, who is also white, and sits with her legs encircling his hips. She has one face and two arms. She holds a curved knife in her right hand and a nectar-filled skull cup in her right. The knife symbolizes wisdom. Its purpose is to cut wrong conceptions, the ego's projections, and gravitational attachment to sense pleasures. The nectar-filled kapala shows that she has attained the everlasting blissful realization of enlightenment. It is not simply an up and down worldly woman. I don't know what up and down means. It must have been some kind of colloquialism that he was familiar with anyway. Although she is just symbolic, she really gives a great impression. He goes on to talk about a number of things. But basically, he's talking about symbolism and tantric symbolism. And when he gets to talking about the images that you find in paintings, he says something very interesting, which is still on page 44. He says, in fact, these paintings are talking to you beyond words. So I'm gonna jump off from that point. I want to talk about symbolism in Vajrasattva practice, but symbolism in tantric or Vajrayana practice generally, not just in Vajrayana practice, and not just in Vajrasattva practice, because it applies to all. And of course, the fact that there are these symbols that are in some ways challenging has created a lot of difficulty and confusion for a lot of people. The missionaries who first went to Tibet, the Christian missionaries who first went to Tibet in the 19th century, had a lot of unusual things to say about the images that they saw, almost uniformly uncomplimentary. I won't go into details. You can use your imagination and you'll get the general idea. They didn't understand that these things were symbolic. In many ways, they didn't understand the symbolism of their own religion. And they took many things literally that were actually symbolic, which is in many cases a problem in the history of Christianity. I mean, by training, I'm a scholar of comparative religion, so I'm not going to go there. You can take my word for the fact that there's a lot of symbolism in Christianity that has been taken literally, unfortunately, in a lot of respects. But there's a relationship between what's literally true and what's symbolically true. It's not necessarily that things are just one thing or the other. So let me back up and sort of get at that, because it's pretty important to think about these things when we're practicing, and it's easy for them to elude us and forget about them. Or maybe we don't even know about them, haven't thought about them. Or maybe I just have a unique view of things, and that's worth sharing with you from having been practicing for a long time. Last week, I talked about one of my favorite anthropologists, a systems thinker by the name of Gregory Bateson. Perhaps you'll remember this. And he talked about the analog and the digital ways of cognizing. And the point here is that mostly the way we function in the modern Western world is in a kind of a rational way, theoretically a logical way, in which we understand things in a very specific way that our ancestors didn't necessarily understand things. The basis of all Western logic is a very simple proposition. Things are either A or not A. In other words, a thing is either what it is or it's not what it is. If it's left, it can't be right. If it's up, it can't be down. And if it's good, it can't be bad. And if it means this, it can't mean that. Logically speaking, we have to draw very clear distinctions between things, or we don't have good, clear, logical, analytic ways of understanding things. That's fine. I mean, it gets rockets to the moon. It gets my car across Santa Fe. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not the way people always thought. It's actually an achievement of the modern mind. I mean, there were logical thinkers thousands of years ago. The Buddha was a logical thinker. Aristotle was a logical thinker. But from the point of view of the mass of a culture or of a society, that is something that's fairly recent. The more significant point here is that there are other ways of thinking. And one way of thinking, what Bateson calls the analog way of thinking, could be called the symbolic way of thinking. So what is a symbol? Usually it's something like an image that stands for something else. A stop sign comes to my mind. Now, a stop sign is an octagon. It's red. It has the word stop in it. So you're not going to be able to be making any mistake about what it means. But even if the word stop was not in a red octagon on the corner someplace, you know what it meant. It's a symbol that conveys a meaning. It means put your foot on the brakes. In Santa Fe, it usually means that. It doesn't always mean that, but it's supposed to mean that. It's like red light. Red light, that's a symbol. It's supposed to mean stop. Again, in Santa Fe, some people, I don't know, I won't go there. But people who live here know what I'm talking about. Lama Yeshe was talking about the kapala as a symbol, the skull bowl, which is full of, he called it nectar, and in another place he calls it blood, which is a symbol for something. It's an image which refers to something else. It conveys that meaning in a way that maybe something else can't convey. Now, the difficulty, in my experience, the difficulty is that we approach symbols, at least initially, with our rational mind, rather than with our symbolic mind. And because we approach symbols with our rational mind, we try to understand them rationally, which doesn't work because they aren't meant to be understood rationally. They're meant to be understood symbolically. Now, this is going to get a little confusing, I think, because if I say, oh, it's meant to be understood symbolically, you can say, okay, so my rational mind understands that the kapala, which is filled with nectar or blood, means something. It has a meaning other than just what I see. That's what my rational mind says. It has a meaning other than just what I see. But the point of it actually, again, in my experience, to share with you, the point of it is not to think about it rationally, but to enter your own level of consciousness whereby symbols are alive and their meaning is exactly what they are. They don't stand for something else. Are you following this? This is a little bit, I think, of a radical idea for really, rational Western modern thinkers. The idea that to really get at what, say, these images behind me are about, which last week I called targets, and I hope that was not something anybody found insulting, but they are what they are. For our rational mind, they're symbolic. They mean something else. But for our symbol-using mind, which is like another part of ourselves, maybe the subconscious part of ourselves, they are exactly what they are. They don't mean something else. They just are what they are. What's in the Kapala is just what's in the Kapala. Okay. So what is it that's in there? And this is important if you're doing Vajrasattva practice. What is it? Because there are 4 symbols, to use that language, that Vajrasattva and consort hold. There's the dorje, the bell, the curved knife, and the skull bowl. They're not there arbitrarily. They're important, okay? So let's think about this for a minute. Skull cup, skull. We've all got one. Okay. Dorje Nyima holds the skull cup like this, like a bowl. But what's our skull doing? It's like this. What's in our skull cup? Well, you could say it's our brains. That's pretty literal, okay? If we're talking about a skull cup, which is, this is my skull cup, you could say my brains are in here. But there's something else that's in here, right? What happens if you take a cup and you turn it upside down? I'm not going to do this with my tea, we'd have a mess. But what happens if you take a cup and you turn it upside down, right? It empties. Everything that's in there goes like this, right? So what is being symbolized here? Okay. The energy that comes in here and runs straight down like that. That's what's being symbolized in my experience. That's what's being symbolized by the nectar or the blood that's in the skull cup. The energy that descends through the skull, that circulates the body, through the body, beginning at the skull. Now, Lama Yeshe has talked about the inner refuge, the secret refuge, the outer refuge. The outer refuge is what's out there, imagining the lamas being out there. We'll talk about outside and inside a little bit later, if there is such a thing. The inner refuge depends upon the understanding of emptiness, but the secret refuge is all about the inner energies, and it's the most profound refuge, according to Lama Yeshe. So there's something about this energy that's coming down here that has to do with this profound refuge. Okay. If you're in the depths of practice, whereby symbols, what we are calling symbols, the rational mind, are experienced for just what they are, not as meaning something else, you have the experience of the energy coming down through your skull cup. You experience that energy. Okay. You can when you practice long enough. You will if you practice long enough. I do because I practiced long enough. There's nothing special about me. What about the curved knife? For years, that was a mystery to me. What's the deal with the curved knife? Now, Lama Yeshe says, again, this is the rational mind speaking about it symbolically, the curved knife cuts away delusions, cuts away illusions, right? It is actually, technically, that curved knife is a skinning knife. What happens if you take the skin away? The appearance is removed. Symbolically, it's the removing of appearance, okay? But if it's experienced at the level of being what it is rather than symbolic of something else, what could it be? Okay, if the Kapala symbolizes the energy that's coming down, is it possible the curved knife symbolizes the energy that's going up? So again, that's been my experience. And so the way I experienced that, and I think the way you could experience that if you wanted to, is through practicing something called the vase breathing. And the 9-round breathing exercise is preliminary to that. Okay. Now, there's this tradition in Tibetan Tantra. Now, this comes out of the yogas of Naropa, in which there is a practice called Tumo, which actually means the Great Mother, which is interesting in itself. Tumo means the Great Mother. But it's also sometimes called the inner heat. And the way that this energy is generated is by controlling the energy just below the navel, which causes an accumulation of energy in the base of the spine. The energy accumulates in the spine and it rises. How is this related to the curved knife? Well, if you practice the vase breathing long enough, you begin to feel that your belly expands and it begins to look like that. That should look familiar. And then you feel the energy going up and it's like the Vajra on top of it. So what do we have here? We have Dorje Nyima symbolically representing the circulation of energy, what goes down, Kapala, what goes up, the curved knife, okay? But when you're engaged with the practice directly, which is what you do if you're practicing the secret refuge, is not symbolic. This is what you're experiencing directly. Now you can say the same thing for the male and female figures. Okay. Theoretically, one represents wisdom and one represents means or compassionate action. In a sense, they both represent the same thing. I'll leave you to explore what those things mean on your own, in your own practice. I'm not going to go there. But what I wanted to do with these images was to convey something about the depths of Tantric or Vajrayana practice, which goes beyond the symbolic. It starts with the rational mind understanding these things symbolically, and then they become what I call targets. But then it moves on to the direct experience of what they are rather than what they represent. Then there's even a deeper level, of course, and a deeper level, and a deeper level. It goes without end. Well, there is an end. It's called a clear light mind. But there are a lot of levels before you get there. That's basically what I wanted to communicate. Okay? So, having gone through all of that, I feel like it might be useful to stop for a minute and take questions, because my guess is you never heard anything like this before. Or maybe you have, but I don't think too many people talk about it very directly. So, I mean, most of the Lamas certainly don't. So if there are questions to explore this in other ways or a little bit more deeply, please let me know. And we can take some time to chat about those things. No. No questions from Cyberland. Okay. That's unusual.
I have a question.
Yeah, Shayla.
Why would with the curved knife, why would she swipe off appearance? Is this
Why? Okay, Shayla's question was, why would Dorje Nyima swipe off appearance with the curved knife, right? Well, I could answer that in several different ways. the main way I want to answer it is that these symbols, when they're directly experienced, do not have only one meaning. Now, again, meaning is a sort of a tricky word when you're at the level of living the symbol. Because when you're at the level of living the symbol, what I think of as meaning doesn't exactly apply. It's sort of like when you see something directly for what it is, like blue. Does blue have meaning when you just see blue? It's just what it is, okay? But to use rational language, these images or these symbols can mean more than one thing at the same time. They're not exclusive. If I shift into trying to answer your question from both my experience and from the way I understand the symbolism of it, the consort, Dorje Nima, usually represents wisdom or the wisdom energy. So wisdom is what cuts away false appearances. So that's one way of answering the question. Wisdom cuts away false appearances. Consort usually represents the wisdom energy. So of course she holds a symbol that cuts away false appearance. Or maybe false appearance isn't even the right word. Maybe the right language would be more like limited appearances or projected appearances or designated appearances, if we take the view of Prasangika Madhyamika, which is where I'm going next. But from the level of experience, hold on a minute. Alternate interpretations that are useful in tantric practice. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. Hold on just a minute, I'll come back to it. But from the level of experience, when you experience the rising energy, your consciousness changes and you begin to see things as they actually are rather than as your rational conscious mind has designated them or imagined them to be. Both are true. Does that make sense, Shayla? You're shaking your head, yes. Okay, so that was a good answer. Okay. It's kind of hard to deal with some of these issues because you have to talk on multiple levels at the same time. For one thing, I'm using language. And I'm not really a poet, and I'm not going to speak poetically like some Orphic bard or something like that. So I'm going to be using rational language to talk about that which is not rational or trans-rational or, I don't know even how to phrase it, right? So it becomes problematic. So using conventional language, the curved knife cuts away appearance. Using the language of direct experience, things just appear as they truly are because you're in a different state of consciousness because your energies have changed. Okay? Seems like the best way that I can answer it. Thumbs up. Okay. So it seems like that was pretty good. Okay. Let me do a shifting of gears, sort of. It's not really a shifting of gears in a certain way, though. But in another way it is. So Lama Yeshe has talked about these three types of refuge. Again, to go back to this, to ground ourselves in the book. He's talked about the outer refuge, the inner refuge, and the secret refuge. What I was doing just now, when I was talking about the direct experience of what's usually considered as symbolic, is referring to the experience or the activities that happen at the level of secret refuge. Okay. So let's back up to talking about inner refuge. And these are not contradictory. So Lama Yeshe was in this commentary he was giving, he went into a lot of conversation about shunyata, emptiness. Understanding emptiness is the way to understand the inner refuge. Okay. Now, let me find a quote or two just to ground us in what he had to say. And then I'll kind of riff on that a little bit. This is a chapter called Inner Refuge and Meditation on Emptiness. And we're on page 31 here. Excuse me. He says, as I mentioned above, when we take inner refuge, our mind should become the wisdom of the greatest transcendental bliss and transform into the divine aspect of Haruka. Transform into the divine aspect of Vajrasattva. So we take inner refuge by evoking or becoming in some way the wisdom mind in the form of Vajrasattva, understanding emptiness, understanding shunyata. And that's the way in which we take inner refuge. Not very easy to do. He says only the intelligent can practice this way earlier on. To be able to understand this way of taking refuge, we have to understand shunyata. If we do not have a perfect understanding of shunyata through realization, this is on the next page, 32. If we do not have a perfect understanding of shunyata through realization, we should at least have a clear conceptual knowledge of it in order to overcome our wrong conception of the way we exist. So what we're going to be doing now is having a conversation about shunyata, which is trying to develop an intellectual understanding of it so that one can move beyond the intellectual understanding to the direct experience. But you start with that. He goes on, to realize the right view, shunyata, first you have to search for and discover it within your own mind. And he also says, you're living in a dream world of dream projections. That's the outer world. Your dreaming mind is making you suffer. And then he moves on and to conclude, and hopefully I'll get there. The yoga method of Haruka Vajrasattva is not solely for purifying negativities, which I haven't got to talking about yet, but is also a method for making possible the quick discovery of the ultimate nature shunyata within our minds through its powerful destruction of wrong conceptions. So let me try and riff on some of these comments a little bit and see if I can say something helpful. I, of course, recommend that you go to the book and read what he has to say in the book. Well, let me see if I can do something useful around some of these concepts. I've been through a lot of this territory before in some of my other talks, but let me do again a brief thumbnail on a couple of points. It's usually said that there are three reasons why phenomena are empty or devoid of inherent existence. It's because all phenomena depend on causes and conditions. They're made up out of parts, particles, and they appear to have the characteristics they have because of the designation or projection of our own mind. The latter, the third, is the most important from the point of prasangika madhyamika, And interestingly, from the point of Vajrasattva practice or tantric practice generally, it's also, from my point of view, the most important point. Why is that? Lama Yeshe has said we live in a world of dream projection. We live in a world of hallucinations. Why is that? It's because the way we understand everything is our own mind projecting meaning and concepts onto the phenomena around us externally and projecting meaning and concepts on what's going on internally. Both. Not just one, but both. The way we understand our own inner experience is as confused, according to these masters, is as confused as the way we understand our outer experience. Now, I think for most of us, it's not too difficult to understand that we're confused about outer experience. But the idea that we're confused about inner experience is, I think, a little bit more challenging because we think we know what's going on in here. We think we know who we are. We think we know what the nature of our consciousness is. We think we know what our thoughts are. But according to Madhyamaka, that's a big mistake. And that's what Lama Yeshe just got through saying. This is a big mistake. That what's actually going on in our inner experience, what's actually going on in our ordinary inner experience, is not what it appears to be. Just like what's actually going on in outer experience is not what it appears to be. Now, excuse me. I think there's some psychologists in the room, and they know that people have a lot of inner experience that's fairly diluted, that things are occurring that appear to be one thing, but they're really quite something else entirely. My favorite example is when you're at work and you're having trouble with the boss who happens to be a man. And basically what you're not liking is you're being told what to do, irrespective of what you want to do. You're being put in the position of a parent and a child. And the boss is like dad. And so all the feelings that you had about dad can conceivably come up in relationship to your boss. That can get you into a whole lot of trouble. It's gotten me into trouble on more than one occasion, I'll tell you that. And if your boss happens to be a woman, and I've had many supervisors who are women, then you have to be careful to separate out mom from the boss. And I've gotten in trouble at times when I haven't done that. That's the negative side. But then there's a positive side too. We love our dads and we love our moms. I don't know, is it possible to love your boss? I mean, you know, not in the way that would get you in trouble, but in a positive kind of way. Appreciation, respect. I've had that experience. It's possible. Can you separate that out from the reality of the person that's there? That's a little bit more complicated. So what's happening? The stuff that's inside is being seen outside, but we don't know that it's inside. We think it's outside. Similarly, stuff that's inside, we don't see clearly for what it is, because those distortions go on internally also. Now, in Prasangika Madhyamaka, it said that the big thing is to understand that reality is nothing but the labels that we've designated on reality, so-called reality. That's all that's there. I mean, there is some sort of base that's out there. I'm trying to remember which. It was the talks that I did on the nature of reality, a book by Lama Zopa. I think it was How Things Exist was the name of the book. And Lama Zopa talked very extensively in that, and I made a lot of comments about the base. which is to say what's actually out there versus what we project onto what's actually out there. It's like the screen onto which we project the movie. Our minds are making up the movie, we project it onto the screen. The screen is the base. There's a big question about whether or not we can actually know the base for what it is. Theoretically, if we withdraw the projections, and if we really believe the teachings of Prasangika Madhyamaka, we can see through the designations, the projections, to see what's actually going on. Now, what that is, that's a whole other kind of question, because it doesn't have any of the typical characteristics we project onto external reality. Okay, now, wow, think about applying that to internal reality. All right, here's one for you. This is the one that's exercising my mind these days. I think I know what my consciousness is. In every moment, right, according to Buddhism, and this is Theravada Buddhism also, in every moment, subject and object arise together. Object being a thought or the external world, and subject being our own consciousness. Those two always arise together. We know that's true because if I'm asleep and I'm not dreaming, there's neither subject nor object, nothing's happening. As soon as I wake up, subject and object are both there. Can't get away from it. Sometimes it seems that they merge, like athletes will talk about being in the zone. But for the most part, there are always subject and object as two separate, as it appears, entities. Now, according to Chittamatra, that's in itself a mistake. That's an illusion. But there is no separation truly between subject and object. But we won't go there. Back to Madhyamaka. What we experience is the projection of our own mind. We don't experience what's actually there. The technical term is designation. I never, in my deluded state, experience things for what they actually are. However, through the practice of meditation, I can see the projections, the designations as such, and ultimately I can get past them if I can meditate one-pointedly and so on and so forth. But here's the interesting thing. Usually the designation process is talked about in negative terms because it's a matter of delusion and confusion. It's confusing ourselves. But what is it that the mind is doing when it's designating? It's using the function of imagination, actually, to create a reality. What are we doing in Vajrayana practice? We're using the very same function of the mind to create an alternate reality, which is the visualized deities and the, quote, symbols that they hold, or the symbols that they are. Okay. So here's the really, from my point of view, amazing thing about Tantra, about Vajrayana. It takes what creates confusion under ordinary circumstances and uses that very same functionality of the mind to extract you from the confusion by creating images, by creating symbols that have the opposite character of the usual designations, which are confusing. This is making sense, isn't it? Okay. So these are all things that you begin to work with at the level of doing the inner refuge, because you're taking refuge in the mind, which either negatively produces obscuration or positively produces the images that extract you from obscuration. So what are you really taking refuge in? You're taking refuge in that which extracts you from obscuration, right? By using that part of the mind. I mean, sometimes it's been said that what Tantra is about is taking negative things and using them in a positive way. You know, let's use anger in a positive way. Let's take the energy out of anger and use it in good ways. Well, here I'm talking about taking the function of delusion and the cognitive capacity to create delusion and use it in a positive way. Okay. So how does this relate to Vajrayana practice, Vajrasattva practice particularly? Well, of course, it relates to Vajrasattva practice because it's a Vajrayana practice. But let's talk about it in much more specific terms. Vajrasattva is a purification practice. That's what it's about. That's what it's said to be about, the purification practice. Okay. Lama Yeshe goes into extreme detail about why we need purification. Why do we need purification? What's going on? Okay. Buddhism is based on the laws, fundamentally, Buddhism is based on the law of cause and effect. The Four Noble Truths, right? Fundamental teaching about Buddhism. There's suffering, there's a source of suffering. There can be a way to end suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path is the way to end suffering. Causes, effects. You do something, it has a consequence. It is impossible to act without there being consequences. That's called karma, right? You can't act without there being consequences. If that's the case, then everything we experience at any given time is the sum total of the consequences of a bunch of stuff that happened in the past. There's nothing that's going on in the present that isn't lawfully related to what happened in the past in some way. Okay. In any given moment, a lot of different things can come together. Okay. Let me give a really mundane example of what I mean here. Excuse me. This morning I was eating some toast for breakfast, and I was standing at my kitchen window eating the toast, and I was looking out in my backyard, and it was sunny and it was warm, and I was thinking, how fortunate I am to be in Santa Fe, this nice warm weather, living in this nice house, looking out of this window, eating this nice bread. There are a lot of people in the world who don't live under such pleasant circumstances, don't have something nice to eat in the morning. Folks in California right now are getting pummeled by rain in horrible ways, really difficult, you know. Not sure what's going on in the East Coast or in other parts of the world. I tend to pay attention to what's happening in California because I'm a California native. I can't escape it. I'm always interested in what's going on in California. But here in Santa Fe, it was pleasant and sunny. So I'd say, okay, so this is the consequence of all kinds of past actions that I now find myself in this pleasant circumstance. However, the heel of my left foot really hurts because my plantar fasciitis has been coming back. So now there's something positive and something negative happening in the same moment, all mixed together, right? That's the reality of our lives. What we call positive and negative are always happening at the same time, always mixed together, because there are all kinds of things that we've done in the past that produce positive outcomes and negative outcomes. It's not just like in any given moment, only one thing is happening. That's just not the way it works, okay? Well, there's nothing super profound about that. But if you think about it from a certain point of view, then you could also think, well, okay, so now I'm experiencing the consequences of something that I've done in the past, which was negative. And it's manifesting in the present as something that's negative. That's the way the law of causality works, according to Buddhists. In the subtlest sense, I'm sure I would never know why I experienced plantar fasciitis or why it came back. In a coarse sense, I actually know the reason it happened. It's pretty simple. But ultimately speaking, I don't know why it's happening. I'll never know why it's happening. It doesn't matter that I know why it's happening. It's happening. So from the Buddhist point of view, because that's what we experience all the time, it's beneficial to do something which will remove the negative, which we're constantly creating or that we're experiencing the consequences of. And Vajrasattva practice is supposed to do that. That's why we engage in Vajrasattva practice. Now then, you could ask an interesting question. How does that work? Why would Vajrasattva practice remove negativities? So let me say something here that's, I think, a little bit radical. Maybe it's not radical. We'll see. Shakyamuni has been known to have said that he can't remove sins by washing them away or something along those lines. So how is it that Vajrasattva is going to remove negativities when Shakyamuni can't wash away sins? What's going on? Are these contradictory? No, they're not contradictory. Because part of Vajrasattva practice is understanding the nature of the emptiness of phenomena. And if you understand the empty nature of phenomena, you've broken the karmic cycle that's associated with cause and effect. Because you see through it. Because cause and effect only functions at a certain level, which is the level of confusion and delusion. Now, it's not like my plantar fasciitis is going to go away because I understand the empty nature of the pain in my left heel. But something else will go away, which is what's related to what brought it about and the way in which I react to the pain that's going on. That can change. Okay. The other thing that can change is if I'm actually engaged in the practice which has been referred to as the secret refuge, which is to say that I truly feel the cycle of energy that Vajrasattva can represent, then yet again something else is happening, because the actual energy that's associated with the manifestation of effects from causes is transformed. What do we mean by transforming energy? How can we transform energy? We do it all the time. These lights are a transformation of energy. The whole way in which this computer functions is a transformation of energy. We can transform mental energy too. So Vajrasattva also transforms mental energy. So it's not like the Buddha saying, I can't wash away your sins. I can't remove the problems you've created for yourself. It's more like you can remove the problems you've created for yourself with this practice. Okay. I'm sounding kind of preachy here. I don't usually like to sound preachy, but I guess I'm feeling kind of strongly about it. And I feel strongly about it. I guess I get into that mode a little bit. Okay. Is this all making sense? Are we good about this? Yeah. Any questions? No questions in Cyberland. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at you a whole lot out there because you're this big. And I can't see you very well. So I apologize for that. I do know you're there. And try and pay attention. But so it is. Okay. All that said, why don't we try and do a little purification practice? Okay. And the goal of this purification practice, of doing Vajrasattva practice, so it actually purifies you, is to see Vajrasattva as absolutely clearly as possible as you can, sitting on your forehead. So clear appearance is very, very important in Vajrayana practice. Then you're going to be first using your imagination, but ultimately experiencing a downward flow of energy from Vajrasattva into your body and into your mind. And that's what's really doing the purification. That's what's doing the transformation. So you may not feel it early on in practice, but if you practice enough, you will experience it. And it will have that effect. You will experience that blissful energy coming down through your head into your body. So let me, just so I don't forget any bits, which I'm inclined to do, let me open up a text here. Okay? So we'll start here. And as I said, this is sort of the short version that I have in a particular sadhana. And I'll read through it so you can just use your imagination as I'm reading through it as best you can. Okay? As always, we begin with refuge. I take refuge in the three jewels. I will liberate all beings. I will exalt them in enlightenment. I conceive the spirit of enlightenment. I take refuge in the three jewels. I will liberate all beings. I will exalt them in enlightenment. I conceive the spirit of enlightenment. I take refuge in the three jewels. I will liberate all beings. I will exalt them in enlightenment. I conceive the spirit of enlightenment. From the syllable pam on my crown, a lotus, and from a moon disk. Upon them from whom a five-pronged white vajra is hub-marked with whom. From that vajra, light radiates, then gathers together, and then the vajra arises as a white Vajrasattva, with one face, two arms, holding vajra and bell. His consort, white Vajraprakriti, has one face and two arms, holding skull bowl and chopper, embracing him. Both wear silks and are adorned with various jewel ornaments. He sits in the Vajra position. On his heart moon, white hum radiates light, inviting the wisdom hero similar to himself. They become indivisible. Again, light radiates from the heart hum, inviting consecration deities. One prays, may all transcendent lords please openly confer consecration. When I pray thus, they hold up vessels filled with wisdom elixirs and confer consecration upon him. Om Sarva Tathagata Vishekata Samaye Shriye Om. His body is filled with wisdom elixir, which overflows to adorn his crown with ikshobhya. One then prays, Lord Vajrasattva, please cleanse and purify all the losses of vows and all sins and obscurations of myself and others. By praying thus, light radiates from the heart hum, purifying the sins and defilements of all beings. Also, offerings are given to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and all their virtues are concentrated into light, dissolving into the heart hum, making his luster and energy outstanding. One then recites the Vajrasattva mantra, and as Lama Yeshe says, what you imagine is blissful energy streaming down from Vajrasattva through the place where they are conjoined, through the top of your head and into your body. And there are various purification practices you can do, but in this case, simply imagine the energy streaming down into your body. I'll recite the mantra one time. You can recite it yourself, or just imagine the energy without the mantra. Om Vajrasattva Samayam Anupalaya, Vajrasattva Tvenopatishta, Drinanabhava, Satushuma Bhava, Sapushuma Bhava, Anarakta Me Bhava, Sarvasiddham Me Prayacha, Sarvakarma Suchim Me Chidam Shriyam, Kuruham, Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan, Sarvatatagata, Vajramame Muncha Vajibhava, Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. One then prays, O Guru, my protector, please give refuge. Deluded by my ignorance, I have broken and lost my vows. Chief holder of the Vajra, whose nature is great compassion, I take refuge in the leader of beings. And Vajra then says, gentle child, all your sins and broken vows are cleansed and purified. He dissolves into me, and my body, speech, and mind become indivisible from those of Vajrasattva. So you imagine Vajrasattva turning into light, dissolving into you through the crown of your head and filling your body as luminous white light. So as you experience the energy, the blissful energy descending from Vajrasattva, you're taking refuge in the secret Buddha. When you think of the emptiness, the shunyata nature of all this experience, that's the inner refuge. And when you remember that Vajrasattva is your Lama, that's the outer refuge. So you can do all three at the same time. Okay. So thank you for joining me in purifying our karma a bit, a teensy little bit, very teensy little bit. There's a lot to purify. Kay and I were on retreat once in Bodh Gaya with our Lama Taratluku. And I think about a week into the retreat, which is a month-long retreat, maybe 10 days, Kay got really sick while we were all practicing together. And she almost died. It was very serious. There were 4 of us practicing with him. And talk about karma. Of the 4, one of them was an MD who come to India stocked with all kinds of pills and good stuff. He basically saved her life. So after being really sick for a really long time, she finally got up and could come back and join us in the retreat. And she said to Tara Rinpoche, wow, I must have purified a lot of bad karma when I got sick. And he said, little bit, just a little bit. There's a lot. So that's not to be depressed at all, because we purify as we go and we realize the truth of things as we go. And we have the Dharma to guide us when we're doing this. So thank you very much for joining us. And let's dedicate this practice to the benefit of all the beings of this world. By speaking a little truth and engaging a little truth, we push aside all the darkness and the lies and the confusion and the hatefulness and the harm that's around. And we add to the great store of beauty and wonderfulness that's here with us all the time also. So let's dedicate our merit to that. And thank you for joining me tonight. I'll be back in 2 weeks, unless there are any parting questions. None?
David, Jay is asking in chat, do we have access to that practice?
The one that I just did? What I'll do is I'll make a photocopy of it, and I will ask that it be posted as a link to this I guess to log in to this. And if that doesn't work, then I will get a digital copy and I'll put it up as a text next time we're together. So if you like it, you can use it. As I said, it was composed by the great Pabanka Rinpoche as part of another sadhana. Okay? Yes.
Is there any initiation required to do it?
Well, to do Vajrasattva ultimately and properly and get the most out of it, the answer would be yes. But people do Vajrasattva practice without an initiation all the time. I would be glad to give you an initiation, but I'm utterly unqualified to do it. Might ask, well, Geshe Sherab's not going to be back for quite a while. We could ask Geshe Sherab to do it when he comes back. Rabina's going to be in town next week. Maybe you could ask her. But she's going to have a lot on her hands. So maybe not. But yeah, you can practice without the initiation. And you can set everything in motion. You can create the good intention and the good mental patterns by practicing in that way. And then when you have the opportunity to have an initiation, it'll just be all the stronger that way. And you might find that it's part of another practice entirely that you receive the initiation for. That's the way it was for me. I received this practice as part of another practice because it's preliminary to so many highest yoga tantra practices. Okay? So did you all understand what the question was? The question, I'm sorry, I didn't repeat it. The question was, can you do this practice without an initiation? And so that was my hopefully correct answer to that. All righty. In 2 weeks, thank you, and bye-bye.